Mac Power Users, episode 509. Brent Simmons, Man of Many Hats. Welcome to the Mac Power Users. This is David Sparks, joined by my fellow co-host, Mr. Stephen Hackett. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm great, David. How are you?
I'm great, and we've got a guest on the show today that's been on my MPU bucket list literally since the beginning. Welcome to the show, Brent Simmons.
Hey, good to talk to you guys.
Brent made one of my favorite apps, NetNewsWire, back in the day, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is not back in the day anymore. We're going to talk about that at some point.
It's back.
One day today will be referred to as back in the day, right?
Well, yeah, there you go. I guess it's all relative,
yes.
Isn't it? But
this got philosophical quick.
Oh man, we don't mess around here on MPU. But Brent is really one of the most gifted Mac developers. I mean, that's the way I was introduced to you, like buying your apps and hearing you and reading the stuff you used to write on your blog about this stuff. But then you kind of did a career transition at one point, and you're doing a lot of marketing and things like that for the Omni Group these days.
Mm-hmm.
Omni Group is sometimes a sponsor of the show. They had nothing to do with this. You know, we reached out to Brent separately. This isn't an Omni ad, this show. But it is interesting how someone with such a talented programmer, but you've done this career change, and I want to hear about that and how you're pulling that off with your Mac hardware today. And to go full circle, NetNewsWire is back in the world again, so we want to talk about that at some point too.
Awesome.
A few bits of introduction. Next week is the annual MPU gift guide episode. You know, Thanksgiving is about here. It's time to make Christmas lists and holiday lists for our friends and family. Maybe time to buy a few things for the nerds in your family. We have a thread going over at the forum at talk.macpowerusers.com. If there's some category you think we must cover or something that we've missed, let us know so we can get it into the gift guide. Any other announcements, Stephen?
I think that's the big one. I cannot believe the holidays are here, just about. That's very upsetting, but it's how it goes, you know? Time speeds up.
I was just thinking it was about a year ago now that we made the big announcement that you were coming on the show, and it's been a great year, man.
It has. Go team.
Yeah, it has. Brent, let's talk about your gear. What are you driving these days?
Well, I have a number of things. I got my home things and I got my work things. So at work, I have a laptop from, I think, 2015, and it's hooked up to a 27-inch monitor. And that's my main thing that I'm using most of the time at work. Also, I have a little side laptop that's kind of newer that I never touch.
Why is that?
It has one of those keyboards, the newer keyboards. And it's like,
you know, every guest we have on the show, in the first segment, when we start talking about their stuff, the keyboards come up.
I hardly ever touch it at all. And now the S key doesn't work.
Great.
And but even if it still worked fine, I just really do not like the feel of it. The arrow keys in particular, just like I cannot get used to it.
Every developer hates the arrow keys and the escape key on those keyboards. I am so looking forward to Apple replacing that keyboard. I do not enjoy banging on about their bad keyboard every guest episode of Mac Power Users. This is not something that I want to do with the show, but it just comes up. I mean, it's not something we're fishing for.
Yeah, right. This is not the anti-keyboard show, after all.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. I saw some leaked images. I don't know if they're real or not, of the new 16-inch one that may be out by the time the show publishes, for all we know. But it looked like the arrow key layout returned to half-size keys for left and right and full size up and down. Would that be better for you or worse? I don't know.
I'll have to try it. I mean, basically the arrow keys didn't change that much for many years. And so my fingers know how they work. And anything different from that is really a huge change, right? Because, you know, you use those all the time, or at least anyone who's writing code or text or whatever is using the arrow keys to navigate around.
Yeah, could you explain, because a lot of the listeners are not developers, obviously.
Sure.
Why are developers so worked up about the escape key and the arrow keys?
For me, it's probably mostly the arrow keys more than the escape key. If you're navigating text and you're good at it and you know how it works on a Mac, you know to use the command key and shift key and whatever to be able to navigate, by word.
Option.
Yeah, option. I couldn't even tell you what the shortcuts are. I just use them all the time.
Exactly.
Right?
It's like finger memory.
Mm-hmm.
You know them, but you couldn't tell me what they are.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you can even navigate inside a word if it's camel cased and all this stuff. And once you're good at that, you're using those arrow keys like all the time just to get around as part of like a huge part of your day that you never have to think about. But then when the arrow keys change and don't feel the same, suddenly nothing is right. You can't navigate around text subconsciously. It's constantly causing like little problems in your brain.
Now the 15-inch does have the older arrow keys then?
Yeah, it does. It's must be one of the last of the old-fashioned keyboards.
That keyboard text situation, I've got a link in the show notes for people who aren't familiar with it, but I'm the same way you are. If I was on some sort of game show and I could win $1 million, if I could tell people those shortcuts, I couldn't do it without a keyboard in front of me because it's just wired into my fingers. And that was still one reason I prefer to do so much work on the Mac over iOS, because a lot of those keyboard shortcuts have come to the iPad over the years, but on the Mac, I can zip around without even thinking about it. And that's way faster than moving my hand to the mouse or to touch the glass screen of an iPad.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Well, I hope that the new MacBook Pro comes out with a new keyboard technology. I just want these days to be over, honestly. I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
All right. So you've got an old laptop that you use and a new laptop that you can't press Command S on because the S key doesn't work.
Can't save. It's hard to do any blogging. It's hard. Yeah. It's just kind of. Yeah. It's like an iTunes jukebox, basically.
Yeah. And then all your email, if I get an email that says best regards, Brent Imman, I'll know that you sent it on the new laptop.
Now, I did just order, just yesterday or the day before, a new, I got the top of the line iPad Pro with keyboard and pencil. And that's for work. So that should arrive, I think, tomorrow. So I'll finally start trying to become more of an iPad user.
Which size did you get?
I got the biggest of the iPads and, all the extras, the keyboard and pencil, to see if I could actually get some work done using it. And also because, I want to use our Omni apps on the big iPad too. I should know better how those work and how those feel and so on. My other iPad is an iPad mini, my personal iPad. And that's mainly used, it's like a small device that shows me things on Netflix.
So that's a big jump in between those sizes. Have you spent much time with the 12.9 before?
I've spent no time.
It really is such a different experience. It's not for me. I prefer the 11, sort of that middle size, but that 12.9 really, something in your brain, at least in my brain, sort of switches in front of that big iPad because the multitasking is so much better with the bigger screen. And it really feels more laptop-like than I think a lot of people would think.
Well, that's good. That's essentially what I'm looking for. Something. I'm going to sit it on my desk and use it basically like a laptop.
Well, I think for your, marketing guru type tasks, you're going to find that it works great. I mean, most of the apps you use are there, and you're going to be fine. It's just like you're not going to do any Xcode there, but that going in.
Right. And at work, I never launch Xcode. So, yeah.
That was kind of a transition for me because I use an iPad as a laptop. I don't have a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
My borrowed one was returned, by the way. So now I'm really laptopless. But I got thinking, well, what is the stuff I actually do? Like there's some certain things that I do need a Mac for, like screencast production and podcast stuff. But I can do all of that on my big machine, on my desk. But when I am out of office, can I get by with iPad? And I found that generally I can now. So I hope you write up or talk about this somewhere. I'd love to hear how that experiment goes for you.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the pain points are that remain on the iPad. And I'll probably end up having to do some research to figure out, how to deal with, say, Git, right? A lot of our content at Omni, because we are very much an engineering organization, we store stuff in Git repositories. rather than say using Dropbox or whatever. So, how does that work on an iPad? I'm used to just doing all this via the terminal on my Mac. And that doesn't exist. So, yeah, we'll see.
But I would imagine there's folks at Omni that have already solved that problem.
There probably are, yeah. And, getting answers to these kind of questions is probably not actually all that difficult. So
I work with one sort of project that everything's on GitHub, and Working Copy is a really nice Git client for iOS, and it's got a text editor in there, and you can bring external files in through the Files app. It's really, really spectacular.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's probably what I'll end up looking at first.
And that Working Copy developer is super with it on automation stuff. So if you want to do shortcuts or anything like that, I think that's probably the best app for that as well. But I do tell people when they ask me which size iPad you get, and I think it's like a mental thing. If you're looking at this thing to be a laptop replacement or something like a laptop, then the big one makes sense. But if you're going to carry a laptop around with you and an iPad, then the small one is the way to go.
Sure.
That's kind of my feeling. I think it's a good rule of thumb. I mean, everybody's different. Or like me, I have both of them, which is an accident, but not such an accident, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that.
All right. So you've got the Mac, and then at home, are you using a laptop as well, or are you using a different Mac at home?
So at home, I have a 2013 MacBook Air. That's really my personal laptop. And then I have a 2012 iMac that I use for development.
Yeah, that was my question. Where are you doing NetNewsWire? So you're doing it on an iMac?
Yeah, mostly on a 7-year-old iMac by now. Yeah. And I do little development on that Air also occasionally if I want to, sit in the living room or something. But it's mostly done on the iMac.
How does that 2012 iMac hold up to the tasks that you've got to do with it with Xcode and your other development work?
Really just fine. NetNewsWire is not a huge app, so it doesn't take forever to compile, for instance, even on an older machine. And, I kind of like using an older machine because I'm always very concerned with performance when I'm writing software. And if it performs well on a 7-year-old iMac, then it's probably going to perform pretty well on, most of the computers that are still in use. So, that's kind of not a bad thing. Though occasionally I do think, boy, I could get a new Mac Pro and NetNewsWire would compile instantly, and but whatever.
It would be instantaneous. Is using an older machine like that? We have a lot of listeners who hang on to machines for a long time. Honestly, if you can get such good life out of them. Apple supports old machines really well in versions of Mac OS. But have you done anything to that iMac in those 7 years to keep it running? I know a popular upgrade for a lot of people is to have it cracked open and put an SSD in it. Is that something that you've done, or is it still stock the way it came?
It's still stock the way it came, but it was a Fusion drive, so there must be some SSD-ness in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. It works great, and it's still on the list of Macs that are getting OS upgrades. So I'm running Catalina on it now. I haven't had any reason to crack it open and do surgery on it.
It's always fun to do, but it really is amazing. I think Apple, it's kind of not really talked about that much, but it's true on the iOS side as well. I think they do a really good job at supporting those older machines where you can have a machine that is 6, 7, 8 years old, and you're still getting macOS updates. But let's just say hypothetically that Catalina is the last OS that iMac would run. I have no idea if that'll be true or not, but hypothetically, Apple then does security patches for their most recent release -1, and you get Safari for that release, and sometimes they'll do security updates even further back. So you really can buy a Mac, and I don't think it's out of the picture to get 9 or 10 years out of useful life out of it as an everyday machine. It's just, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You're not getting that anywhere else, I don't think.
Yeah. And it's such a change from the old days. Back in the 90s, I'd buy a new Mac every couple years, like 3 years at the most. Mm-hmm. And it would be such a huge jump forward. But today, a 2012 iMac is still great for writing an app like NetNewsWire and just about anything else I want to do.
Yeah, we're not having the jumps in processing speed like we used to.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that, the problem with current Macs and frankly, some of the iOS devices too is they get so old, they're still running, but you can't keep the operating software running with it. And like Steven says, Apple does a good job. I mean, you're not going to find a 7 or 8 year old Dell running the most current version of Windows. But quite often, and I know several people in my life that have Macs that just can't get the most recent software updates, but the people who have them are still perfectly happy.
Mm-hmm.
I equate it to something like the way I think of a refrigerator. Like most normal people think of a computer like a refrigerator. You run it, and then one day it breaks, and then you have the repair guy look at it, and maybe you'll fix it if it's not that expensive, or maybe you'll get a new refrigerator. And I'm not that way with computers. That's my sickness, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But most people think about it that way, and I think Apple does actually a really good job of keeping the refrigerator people happy.
Yeah, they do.
And then you're on iPhone as well.
Yep.
Did you get the new one?
I have an iPhone 10.
All right.
And at first I was super skeptical of the notch, and I still think the notch is a failure in a way. It's like, but there wasn't another way out of it. So they just decided to own it. And like, okay, that makes sense. I get it. I look forward to a notchless future at some point. But the best thing was getting rid of the home button, because the home button broke on every single iPhone that I've ever owned. So not having that issue is really huge. And for me personally, it's the best thing about the newer iPhones.
Yeah, well, S keys and home buttons, they don't like you.
No, I guess not.
Thankfully, you don't need them all that often, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I don't like the notch, but I got used to it very quickly. I don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah, it's just weird, but I just don't think about it.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password, the tool that I use and trust to keep all of my passwords safe and secure across all of my devices, syncing seamlessly with the 1Password service. This means that if I need to log into Twitter on my iPhone, check a bank website on my iPad, or maybe log into something on my iMac Pro, all my passwords are with me, and they're safe and secure because 1Password is the best in the business. The team has worked hard to get 1Password ready for macOS Catalina. They have a new blog post over on their website, 1password.com, explaining a little bit about what they had to do to make sure 1Password really sings on the latest macOS. And that's one thing I love about 1Password. They're always on top of the newest technology. So that means that 1Password can unlock with Face ID on the iPhone and iPad. It means that it's ready to go for new macOS releases every single year, and it means that I can trust them day in and day out. At Relay FM, we use 1Password for teams with several different vaults. So Mike Hurley, my partner, and I, we share a set of passwords, but then there's another vault that we use with our sales manager. So she has access to some accounts, but not everything. And we can divide things up how we need them. So I know that everyone has the ability to log in to whatever they need to, wherever they are. You can learn more at 1password.com/MPU. Sign up for a free 30-day trial. Go check this out because it means that you'll have all your stuff wherever you are. Saving passwords on things like sticky notes attached to your computer, don't do that. You need something like 1Password to make sure that all your accounts are safe and secure. So once again, that's 1password.com/MPU for a free 30-day trial. And when you sign up, you'll get 20% off. Head on over to 1password.com/MPU. Our thanks to 1Password for their continued support of the show.
So, Brent, I was surprised when I heard that you joined the Omni Group in the marketing department. When I first heard you went over there, I thought that you would be, writing code for them. How did you land there?
Let's see. I just passed my 5-year mark at Omni, so I've been there a while now.
Wow.
And at first I was in engineering. When I came on, I was working on OmniFocus for Mac. And then a little while later, switched over to Omni Outliner. Worked on mostly the Mac version, then a little bit on iOS. And so at about 3.5 years in as an engineer, I switched over to marketing. And that was because one day, Ken and the marketing manager came into my office and asked me if I'd like to switch over to marketing. And I said, yes. And there's a little bit more to this story than that. I had already started doing the Omni Show podcast. And I was already actually attending marketing meetings. So, I was kind of, helping out a little bit there. But then it turned out that the person who was doing my job wanted to move into front-end web development, and then somebody else wanted to do something else. And there was like a big rotation, like 3 or 4 people suddenly just kind of rotated jobs one day. And that was cool. Now, to a lot of people, me in marketing sounds like what? He's a programmer. How could he be doing this? But as an independent developer of NetNewsWire and some other things, I've had to do marketing for most of my career. And marketing, at this level, it's not that much, buying ads and doing campaigns. It's writing for the blog, that kind of thing. Being online, being accessible, that kind of stuff. And so Omni needed that. Now we also do run ads and do sponsorships and do stuff that I've had to learn about. But it was actually a pretty natural fit. And so my job, a lot of it is really content creation. It's, writing the blog posts, doing the podcast, writing tutorials, notes for the App Store, just all kinds of stuff like that.
Well,
which is, is up my alley as programming is. So,
well, also, I think it's nice once in a while to repot yourself into something else. Just because life is, as you go through life, sometimes you want to do something different once in a while.
And it puts me in the wonderful position now of being an amateur programmer, which I actually really, really love that. Programming started off for me, when I was 12 years old, just something I really enjoyed doing. It was, I did it.
Yeah.
I worked on what I wanted to, and it was just for the fun and love of it. And now I'm, after, decades of experience, back to where I can just do it because I love it and I can do what I want to do. And that's really, really cool.
Yeah. And for the benefit of the Mac Power Users audience, it entirely changes your tool set. Yeah. I'm guessing you're not doing a whole lot of marketing stuff in Xcode.
That's right. Yeah. No.
It's a terrible blog editor.
All right. So let's talk about that. The types of work you're doing and the tools you're using to pull it off.
Okay.
Starting with, I guess, mail. Is that something that you do a lot of now? I'm guessing it is.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of email involved. It's probably not nearly as much as you think it is. But we also have an online system called RT, I guess. I don't know if that stands for something. But any emails sent to marketing@omnigroup.com, for instance, will go in there. And so I have, this browser-based thing where I'm, dealing with various types of inquiries and so on.
Is that a third-party service or an internal tool?
Yeah, it's not one that we wrote. Yeah.
Yeah. I use a similar thing with Basecamp where for the legal side, the client emails get funneled into an online project. So everything gets kind of stored together and you can manage them. But is that RT where you do the email or do you write the email in some other application?
So yeah, this is email coming in. And then when I go to compose something, I usually just open the Scratchpad and BB Edit.
All right.
And then compose it there and then just paste it into the text field in my browser. Yep. Unless it's, really a 1 or 2 sentence thing, then I'll just do it right there in the browser.
That's the most important lesson of this entire show is never write text of any substance in the browser.
Yeah, right. Don't do it. Yeah.
I just recently was doing something somewhere where the page is randomly refreshed and I lost a bunch of text. I'm like, oh yeah, that's because I was dumb.
Right. Yeah.
I did this and I knew better.
Yeah. Sometimes your brain is like, oh, well, just this one time it'll be fine. But it won't be.
And then karma zaps you like a lightning bolt.
Mm-hmm.
So BB Edit's where I actually do that in drafts, but I do the exact same thing. I don't write in any online based form, but now that drafts is on the Mac, I use that for it. And then quite often for me, it goes through Grammarly too before I send it because my grammar isn't always the best. Steven, what about you? Where do you put that stuff before you put it in an online form?
If I'm on the Mac, I'll use Byword, which
Yeah.
is a little simple markdown editor.
Oh yeah, great app.
I mean, I Byword is basically always open, and with a half-written blog post, or like right now while we're recording, I'm just taking little edit notes. It's just sort of a scratch pad for me all the time.
Now, BB Edit is, a lot of programmers use BB Edit because it's been around forever. Rich Siegel is behind it, and it's a very powerful app. They just had a really big update to that recently. And we covered it on Automators. If you're ever interested in regular expressions, BB Edit has all of the tools. And now they even teach you how to do it in the application. Do you use any of that stuff when you're writing words as opposed to code in BB Edit?
I don't use regular expressions, no. I'll confess I pretty much have never used regular expressions, and I've always been just kind of afraid of them. Look like something, they just don't look, it doesn't look like something you can count on to work exactly the same way every time, which is probably just what it looks like, but I kind of fear that kind of stuff.
Well, it's really just the opposite, and it does work all the time. But in order to do that, it looks like something that is scary.
Yeah, right, for sure. Yeah. So but BB Edit is a great app for so many other reasons. And one thing I love about it is, I do a lot of writing in Markdown, and it does Markdown syntax coloring, but it doesn't try to do like, oh, we're going to make this thing here over in the gutter now, and this other thing is going to be large, type, bold, and gray. It doesn't like super transform your writing experience, which is really helpful to me. Yeah. Because sometimes those apps, it can be wonderful if you're using them just like they expect you to. Other times they kind of are too smart and mess me up.
Well, this is a little bit of overlap with what we talked about on Automators, but one of my favorite BB Edit tools is, as a lawyer, sometimes I get on these cases where we've got boxes and boxes of documents that we need to search through. And so I'll have, when they scan it, I'll get one OCR file of the entire scan. And then BB Edit, you can put, it seems like an infinite amount of text in BB Edit, and it never hangs up or crashes. It's the app that can handle, it seems like an infinite amount of text, and then use a regular expression to search through it. And you can find the one instance of, May blank, 2016, and it has the word kumquat, within 30 words. You can do that with a regular expression. And everybody that I work with on the legal side is like, how did you find that? And I never tell them, well, it's just BB Edit and a regular expression. I let them think I read it all,
Right.
But it is an amazing app. But also there's just so many people that just use it as their everyday text editor because it's heavy enough to do the thing I just described, but it's light enough to write a blog post in too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Or an email.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool. So you don't have to deal with the whole what's the best mail app for me thing because you just do it in the web.
Yeah. So a lot of my emails is on the web, but a fair amount's actually still in mail, and I just use mail, from Apple. And, that's fine. I haven't done much to customize it or anything. Mainly, I just archive stuff. There's a keyboard shortcut for that. And I get down to inbox 0 at least once a day.
You're a better man than me.
Yeah. If I have anything in my inbox, I can't make myself work on anything else. It's I think, a personality deficiency that just happens to look like a virtue.
What are some of the other tools you use to get your work done?
Oh, boy. Well, so obviously I use Omni apps. Omni Outliner, for instance, is a huge thing. I do a lot of research, and that goes in Omni Outliner. I also keep just a daily log of what I do every day. So I could tell you for any random day what I actually did. I never find myself going back, but I could.
Could you explain how you make that?
Oh, sure. So since it's an outliner, right, you have high level things and sub things and sub things. So like a high level thing is a year, 2019, and then I'll have months under that, and then under that will be days, and then under each day I just add a new entry for whatever I've done.
Yeah, and you use the word log in lieu of diary. So I'm guessing what I take from this is literally just a log. It's like from this time, that time, I was in a meeting on this problem.
Right, and I don't actually record the times. I just kind of record what I did that day. So at work, we also use an app called Omni Bug Zapper, which is entirely internal, and it's our bug tracking system. So my log will often just have links to, like a little URL link into Omni Bug Zapper, and then under that I'll say, I wrote the first draft and send it around to the product managers or whatever, stuff like that.
Do you ever reference that, or is it just do you ever reference it?
That log? So do sometimes in the short term, like there might be, what was I working on Thursday? There was something about that I needed to look. Maybe I don't remember the bug number, obviously, right? That's weird. Long numbers are hard to remember. So, I'll go back a few days and then look up that thing. I also collect everyday mentions of Omni and Omni products on the web. So in every day in the log, there'll be like a few links to, blog posts or something. Someone's written about OmniFocus or whatever. So at the end of the week, I go through the week and just package those all up, categorize them, and send them out to people like Ken. So yeah, I do go back a little bit, but I don't usually have a need to go back like, what was I doing, July 14th, 2018, Sure. Yeah, I don't need to know that. But it's kind of nice to know it's there,
Yeah, I think you're going to really like that when you take on the iPad lifestyle, the syncing between the two, that'll be kind of nice. So you can remotely do that as well.
Yeah, that'll be cool. So yeah, I use a ton of apps at work. Mattermost is our internal chat app. And we use that because instead of Slack, for instance, because we can self-host it. So there's a lot there. I use Mars Edit for blogging. Yeah.
Can I ask on Mattermost, how does that compare to Slack? I mean, I know there's a lot of listeners that are interested in Slack but don't want to, deal with putting all their data on the Slack servers.
I think Slack's a little slicker. Maybe has more stuff you can do. But Mattermost does have things like the most critical feature of all, of course, is the emoji reaction. And it has that. Right? So, it works well, and you can set up different rooms, and they can be private or public. And yeah, it's Slack-like enough that if you just wanted something you could host yourself, I'd say go for it.
Yeah, I think there's a market for that kind of app now. I think because people are seeing the benefits of Slack, but not everybody wants to jump on the Slack bandwagon.
Well, and having something that you can host yourself, I mean, it works for Omni Group, I'd imagine, because everyone there is super nerdy. But there are, companies and really whole categories of companies that have real regulation around what they could have on a server they don't control, or have real security concerns, and it's got to be nice to have alternatives for those folks as well.
Yeah, and that's worth remembering. A lot of categories of companies are highly regulated in those kind of ways.
Or like certain fruit companies in Cupertino, highly secretive.
That's true.
And they just don't want it on somebody else's server.
Right. That sort of thing is interesting because it's not something that end consumers really see that much. Like if you're, I don't know, I was in a Slack group for a bachelor party about a year ago, right? It's this is really casual, and we just spun it up and did it. But having these enterprise type things, I mean, that's a lot of the world runs on that stuff,
Yeah, things have to be auditable and all this stuff. Yeah, and no data can ever be destroyed. I mean, depending on the regulations, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bachelor party, we didn't really run into the the FCC regulations or anything. So.
No, but there are regulations. If anybody attending the bachelor party is married, there are definitely
that's a different
laws and regulations in effect.
Thing. Different.
What about browsers? You were telling me you've got two browsers. I think it was kind of funny how you set up your browsers.
So I use Safari most of the time for pretty much everything, except as a big part of my work is doing social media stuff, and that does include Facebook. So we have a page on Facebook, and I have to post stuff there and answer questions and so on. And so I use Chrome just for Facebook to try and quarantine that, so that hopefully I don't end up with Facebook tracking me around on Safari. I don't know. It could be that, it feels good but doesn't actually have any effect. But I try to get away from the nefarious effects of Facebook that way.
Yeah, I know so many Mac users that have a specific reason for Chrome, that like it's used for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. I've never thought about it for a Facebook client because I am largely off Facebook. I kept my Facebook account, so we've still got the referral. So people who go into the old Mac Power Users Facebook group, they can still see the post that says, no, we moved it to something that's not on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at this point, I can probably just shut that down. It's been long enough.
Yeah, I got rid of my account years ago and haven't really missed it. But I do think it is interesting to use Chrome to sort of quarantine it, like you said. I know people who have done that for Google Docs or Google Drive, or like for me, I use Safari, but I keep Chrome around for a couple of tasks that I don't have to do real often, but the websites I have to use don't work super well in Safari, and they behave well in Chrome. So if I open Chrome, I've got a handful of bookmarks of just things that I need to use every once in a while, and then come back to Safari.
Yeah, I used to use it for Flash because Chrome had Flash baked in, and I didn't want to install Flash in Safari. But I can't remember the last time I hit that roadblock where I was in a Safari site and it said you need a Flash. So
and even now Chrome is getting rid of it. I mean, Flash is
is it? Yeah,
pretty much gone. Yeah,
That's right. I do use it for if I want to stream MSNBC on my computer. That still uses Flash. So yeah, I'll launch Chrome for that too. Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's like the last thing. I mean,
kidding.
Obviously they're going to have to stop using Flash, but since it's going away.
Uh-huh.
It always cracks me up because Disney uses Flash a lot with all their various stuff. And the biggest shareholder in Disney for the last few years of his life was Steve Jobs. And I still think it may be Laureen Jobs may still be the biggest shareholder. I don't know if that's still the case or not, but it's like it just cracked me up that, yeah, this guy who ran Apple and really started the end of Flash was on the board and hugely involved with this company that ran on Flash.
I wonder if at that level they even talk about things like Flash.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Because they've got a lot of money to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, it would be, I'd obsess on it, but then that's why I probably would never get to that level.
Y'all remember that open letter Jobs wrote about Flash? It was, I found it again. I remember it being absolutely brutal about, there's 5 or 6 reasons that we're not going to support this on our iPhone. Like, time to move on.
Well, do you remember the guy who went back after Steve from Adobe?
Well, there's Kevin Lynch was a Flash.
Yes. Yes. It was Kevin Lynch.
The Flash guy, and now he's the Apple Watch.
Yeah, now he works for
working
Apple.
on the Apple Watch.
He's the guy that gets on stage every year to tell you why the Apple Watch is better.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, we all have things in our past that, we move on from. His just happens to be Flash.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, back then, in writing that newswire, I would get crash logs that would automatically come to me, and semi-automatically. And a lot of them were crashes in Flash. Flash was probably the single biggest cause of crashes in the app. And so I had reason to just despise it. Because any user doesn't know that it was Flash. They just think that my app crashed. And, they're right?
Right.
It did. Not my fault, but,
But at the time, everybody was so convinced that it was so embedded in the web that there was no way out of it. And you know what? That wasn't true. It went away. Good to remember. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Text Expander. Text Expander is the text expansion app you need and so much more. Go to textexpander.com/podcast and let them know you heard about it at Mac Power Users to get 20% off your first year. We talk about automation all the time on the Mac Power Users, and Text Expander gives the easiest type of automation. Anybody listening to this ad can add Text Expander automation to their life. Think of anything you type repeatedly. Maybe it's your cell phone number or directions to your office. With Text Expander, you can save that as a snippet and then just trigger it with text anytime you need it. For instance, whenever I type WDIR, that gets me work directions. I can put that in an email when I have a client that needs to meet me at my office. But Text Expander has also all those really powerful Mac Power User features, like the ability to embed scripts, including Apple scripts, the ability to choose between plain text and rich text, and even the ability to add system information like the current date. I've talked on the show about my XDS text expander snippet that automatically puts in the current date. I use that thing so many times every day, and I just noticed in the forums that there was another listener talking about how often they use those date stamps out of Text Expander. You can unlock your productivity with Text Expander. And over on iOS, Text Expander also continues to evolve. It now has dark mode support, and they have Text Expander for Teams to unify your organization's voice with shared snippets. You too can make everything you write repetitively available everywhere you type with Text Expander. Text Expander is available for Mac OS, Chrome, iPhone, iPad, and also folks over on the Windows side. So if you're working on a Windows desktop at work and a Mac at home, Text Expander's got you covered. And best of all, listeners get 20% off their first year. Just go to textexpander.com/podcast to learn more about Text Expander. And thank you, Text Expander, for all of your support of the Mac Power users. You know, something everybody, whether you've got a huge business or small business these days, needs to manage is social media. And now you're doing that with Omni Group. Share some wisdom with us on social media and how you're handling it.
I guess I'm not sure which parts of my experience are wise or not.
Mistakes are good too. We want to hear about those. It helps us out.
I use Twitterific on my Mac. And let's see, right now, because it is open, I can count the windows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 10 different windows open. And that's just, every day, because there are that many different accounts that I have some access to or need to monitor. So that's a whole lot of Twitter stuff. Jeez.
That's a lot of Twitter.
Yeah, it really is. All those windows can't fit neatly tiled around the screen either. So my approach there is to make sure that the company has like what I think of as a heartbeat. In other words, like every day we're putting something somewhere. And most of what I do goes through the Omni Group account on Twitter. And then the product accounts are run generally more by the various product managers. But I can still access those. And I think the second really big thing there is just to make sure that we're always accessible. There's the old stereotype of the developers in their ivory tower, and you can't talk to them, you can't get help from them. And so the company tries to make sure that we're always easily reachable via Twitter and other means too. Now, sometimes it means we'll say, hey, please actually do email support, but at least we were there to respond to whatever someone's saying or asking.
That's a hard thing, I think, for the Omni Group, because it's a small company, but it's a big company too. I mean, you guys make a lot of products. There's quite a few employees, but it's not Microsoft.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, how do you thread that needle?
Well, a lot of that, the social media part, a lot of that's me, but a lot of it is Ken Case, right? Our CEO is very accessible, very active on Twitter. And then our support folks are great at handling stuff that comes into the various product accounts and helping people out. And then the product managers are on it too. So, it's a team effort, and I think we do a pretty good job with it. We could probably do more promotion that way. But, we're ramping up there. We're getting better at it.
What's the biggest challenge for you in this new role?
The biggest challenge is probably that my background is really doing indie developer marketing, like from the point of view where a place like Omni seems huge, even though it's not. It's under 100 people. It's not actually huge. But I'm used to, marketing for me or maybe just a very small team. So what we have now are things like sponsorships and campaigns and, paying more attention to how we talk about the apps and branding and consistency and, all kinds of stuff to look at that I never really had to deal with before. So, I'm learning all that stuff. And other people are learning it too. And, we're just trying to steadily improve at those things.
I think there's also an aspect, and we run into this on the Relay FM side, where in the past, feedback would be relatively private. So someone would email you with an issue or a concern or whatever. But now it can just be on Twitter. And if they put the period in front of it, it's for all of their Twitter followers, and things can be out in the open. And that gives people not only a boldness, maybe if they're on the complaint side of things, but I think for those of us who are on the receiving end of that, we have to remember that anything that we put into the world could be seen by anybody, and that just wasn't the case in the past. And so for me, it really makes me consider how I'm going to respond to somebody, and if they touched a nerve or they just caught me at a bad time, then I have had to learn that now is not the time to respond, maybe more level-headed a few hours down the road.
Yeah, I totally see what you're talking about. And for some reason, I've always found that somewhat easy because I kind of like it when somebody comes in hot, and then I can turn them around at least a little bit by being like a really nice person. I used to call it killing them with kindness. But that's actually a good way to do it. And I would take pride in how well I was able to do that. And sometimes those people will then turn around so far that they'll become some of your biggest ambassadors too. And that's always great.
Yeah. Seth thing I read in one of the Seth Godin books that I really try to apply to my stuff, the field guides, is whenever a customer has a small issue, I want to make it a big issue for me, to resolve it as fast and as quickly as possible. Whereas if you treat a customer problem as a small issue, then it becomes a big issue for them. And that's not what you want.
And I love how much, in general, our company does really great support. We have a good sized team, and we even do phone support, which is relatively rare, I think, for companies like this.
So now that you're not spending your whole day in Xcode, what are the other tools you're using to get your job done?
Good question. Let's see. There's a lot of things. I use Mars Edit for blogging. I also do social media via Micro.blog, Manton Reese's thing. For instance, every single day around 10 or 11 a.m., I post what we're going to have for lunch at Omni. Just because, it's kind of a way for me to warm up for the day. And it goes back to that daily heartbeat thing. At least I got one thing up on the web in a given day. And that might only just be what's for lunch, but at least it's something, right?
Yeah. You should post it earlier so I know if I should try and catch a plane and get a free lunch.
For you, I'll just send you the weekly menu.
All right. I appreciate that.
Let's see. And of course, use Calendar like anybody else. We've got meetings and so on to not miss. I use IA Writer kind of a bit. There are some things I like about how it handles when you have like a folder and subfolders and stuff. And my writing is organized in that way. So I do use that a bit.
I haven't used IA Writer in years. Now, how do you see that in comparison to BB Edit?
It's different for sure. And there are things about IA Writer that annoy me. Like it does try to do too much with the, markdown handling. But I think all of the apps do. So I like the way it handles when you have a folder and subfolders of stuff. For instance, putting stuff that you most recently edited up at the top of the list, so it's easy to find. That kind of thing is nice because I have folders and subfolders with a whole lot of text documents. Every blog post, every newsletter I've written, every post to the microblog about somebody's cat that I've written, it's all there. And it does make it easy to find stuff and get back to what I was working on. So that's nice.
Have you played much with the Apple Notes app? Because that's kind of what that does now too.
Yeah, except that I do need some Markdown support. And I also like that iWriter has, I think it's Command R, and you can see, the HTML version of what you're working. And Notes just doesn't.
Yeah, Apple Notes is really just rich text, yeah.
I use Terminal, of course, mostly for Git. All my marketing stuff lives in a Git repository, for instance. I use Marked a lot when I'm writing in BB Edit and I need Markdown previews.
I wonder just on that idea of a Git repository for text. So Git, for listeners who are not familiar with it, it started out life as a way to share programming code, and a lot of programmers use it to have like a database of code, and you can, I think, is the term a deposit or a submission? I forget what the exact term of art is, but you can commit code to this repository and then other programmers can see it. But programmers that also work with words have kind of taken on this idea, and it's basically a cloud-based storage system where you can track changes very easily without like a traditional word processor. There's a lot of power in there. I feel like that's something that normal users should be aware of, because I feel like it's something that maybe a lot more people than programmers can use, but the only people that actually use it that way are programmers.
That's basically true. And yeah, Git is super nerdy, super powerful. But and one of the great things about Git is that it makes collaboration so much easier.
Yeah.
Right? Because say you and I were working on the same text file, and I changed some stuff at the top and you changed some stuff at the bottom. Well, Git's smart enough to figure out how to merge those together, rather than forcing you to resolve that conflict. So Git's really good at that kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of people resort to like Google Docs or Quip for something like that,
Sure.
but it doesn't really track a revision history the way you get with Git. I feel like there's an opportunity there for someone to make an app to kind of democratize that system, where you don't need to be a programmer. You can download an app and push a few buttons and start working with multiple people on words. But I can't really put my head around it yet, but I feel like there's got to be something out there at some point that takes advantage of that for everybody.
You do run into the problem with something like that, though, that you've made it simple and democratic enough, but then some number of users are like, well, if you also adopted this one slightly more powerful feature, and then you do, and then maybe a few more of those, and now it's geeky.
Yeah, I know. There's no. It's like, how do you balance it? You never. The answer is you never really do.
Yeah, that's right. And then you've added enough of those features, and now people are like, "Wow, your UI is kind of complicated." But there's this brand new competitor that's really simple, and I'm going to switch to them.
When I did the Siri Shortcuts field guide, the new one, I had a couple of people complain with the first one that I didn't cover enough advanced material. So the new one, I added like an hour's worth of advanced material, and I released it. And that person wrote me back an email after the new one came out and complained that I made it too long now. And I'm like, it's the same person. What am I supposed to do?
Always remember, you can't win.
Yeah, when I worked at Disneyland, sometimes I was a Jungle Cruise skipper, and people would get on the boat and they'd just be angry. And then I after a while, I came to the realization that is their standard for Disneyland. They're just unhappy being there. So I'm just going to let them be unhappy, because that is their experience. So that's fine. Can't fix them all.
This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Linode. With Linode, you can instantly deploy and manage an SSD server in the Linode cloud and get a server up and running in just seconds with your choice of Linux distro, resources, and node location. Linode served their customers with the help of 10 data centers across the globe, and they're about to add 2 more. Mumbai, India, and Toronto, Canada will both have new data centers before 2020. Linode's machines feature native SSD storage, 40 gigabit networking, and Intel E5 processors, meaning you're able to serve your customers even faster than before. And you don't have to stress about overspending, because Linode has designed their pricing tiers to feature hourly billing, with the added bonus of a monthly cap on all plans and add-on services such as backups and node balancers. Linode has pricing options to suit everyone. Their plans start at just 1 gigabyte of RAM for $5 a month, and they offer high memory plans starting at 16 gigabytes of RAM. And these servers are really easy to manage. We've been using Linode at Relay FM for a long time, and anytime you need to go check on something or change something, it's a breeze. And Linode has a special offer for you. As a listener of the show, go to linode.com/MPU and use the promo code MPU2019 to get $20 towards any Linode plan. On that 1 gigabyte plan, that's 4 free months. And with a 7-day money-back guarantee, you have nothing to lose. Give Linode a try today. That's linode.com/MPU and the promo code MPU2019 to learn more, sign up, and make the most of that $20 credit. Our thanks to Linode for their support of this show and Relay FM. Brent, NetNewsWire was one of the earliest third-party apps I installed way back in the day when I kind of became a serious Mac user, and it was relatively new, and I just remember being blown away that instead of having to go around to the 8 or 10 websites I would read every day, I could put them all in NetNewsWire, and through the magic of RSS, new articles would just come to me. And I remember being completely enthralled with that idea. And now I have an entire company built on the back of RSS. So, things come full circle. And now you've brought it back. So I wonder for those who may not know the history, what's a little bit of the background of this app and kind of where's it been and where is it now?
The app has been around the block. It's traveled the world, and now it's come home. I started it in 2002, right after I had left Userland Software, where I worked with Dave Weiner, who is, I don't know if you would say the inventor or popularizer or refiner of RSS and podcasting and some other things. And after I left Userland, I really wanted to do something with RSS. And I was torn between, just writing maybe some Python scripts for my own use, or maybe writing a Mac app. And I decided I'll try writing a Mac app. It probably won't do very well, but I'll give it a go. And to my surprise, it did really quite well. And then some years later, a company called NewsGator, which was an RSS company, acquired the app and hired me. So I continued to work on it for a number of years up until 2011, which is when we sold the app from NewsGator to Black Pixel. And they worked on it for a number of years before just last year giving the name back to me. Since I had already been working on a new RSS reader, which I was calling Evergreen. They gave me the name NetNewsWire back, and so I renamed Evergreen to NetNewsWire, and that's the story. Now we've got NetNewsWire 5 out, and we're working on the iOS app.
So this is not an updated version of the original NetNewsWire, but a from scratch RSS newsreader.
Absolutely. It really is a 1.0 app in disguise as an ancient 5.0.
It must have been fun starting over again, really. I mean, with something you know so much more about now than you did the first time you wrote it.
Yeah, it really was. It was an opportunity to use everything I had learned, and also use some of the new tools like the Swift programming language, and to just say to myself, all right, I'm going to do it right this time now that I know stuff. And the quality of the app, from code all the way up through design and everything else, is, I think, way better than it's ever been in its lifetime. It still doesn't have all the features it once had, but that's okay. You got to start with the basics, and I've been working hard to make sure I nail them.
I'm sure you're getting lots of email about features, right?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. Mostly not email. We have a GitHub repository, and people make feature requests there, so it goes right into the bug tracker that we have on GitHub.
Yeah,
and yeah, everybody has their things that they want. And yeah, that's cool. It means they like the app, they're engaged with it, and they want more out of it. That's always a great feeling.
To my knowledge, this was the first RSS app I was ever aware of. Was that a new category when you made it, or were there other apps like this out there?
NetNewsWire was the first native Mac app that was an RSS app. There were other ones. They tended to run in your browser. But this was the first of those, hey, it looks kind of like Mail, and it actually is, a Mac Cocoa app.
Yeah. And
for a while, it was the only, and that was kind of nice. And then,
well, it sure is nice having it back on my Mac, I'll tell you. I don't know. I was a little nostalgic when I ran it for the first time, because it was so long ago that I had started running this app too. I think I was there at the beginning, and it's just great. I mean, I'm so happy that you were able to get it back out. And it's done as an open source project. Now, what led to that decision?
Well, since I have a day job, and the folks at Omni are, it's a great job, and they're totally great with me working on this in my spare time. And I'm like, yeah, well, I just want to work on this in my spare time. And since that spare time is limited, I don't want to, work out a payment system or even deal with taxes or anything. In fact, what I'd rather do is work with people who feel like working with me. That would be way more fun.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm doing.
Like all the marketing stuff you're doing for Omni, you don't have to do it for NetNewsWire. It's like,
right,
take it or leave it, gang. I made
Yeah.
it. It's beautiful. It's free.
Now I do try to promote it because
Yeah.
part of my goal here um, is to get more people using RSS readers in general and try and take away a little bit of how everyone uses Twitter and Facebook for all of this, because I don't think they're that great for this for a bunch of different reasons.
I want to talk about that because I never left the RSS train. But for so long, we heard from people saying, "Oh, I don't need RSS anymore. I just have Twitter." But that's true if you. I mean, I think it really ties into this whole digital minimalism movement that's going on now, and the idea of why are you so tied to your phone? Well, if you're reliant on your RSS on Twitter, if you're relying on Twitter to give you your news, you don't have time to take a break and work on the hard stuff, because you have to keep up with whatever the news is, right?
Yeah.
And
right.
with an RSS reader, I take days off Twitter. I don't go in Twitter sometimes for 2 or 3 days at a time. I'm not as good at it as you are, frankly, and having a presence every day. But then I don't catch the news there, but I have an RSS reader. I can open that at any time. Maybe I'll open it every day or once a week. I still get all my news. It's just I think it's so much better as a mechanism.
Yeah, and one thing about NetNewsWire and most RSS readers, there isn't some kind of shadowy algorithm deciding stuff for you.
Yeah.
Right. And you're not getting stuff shoved in your face that you didn't necessarily ask for. Right. So if I follow somebody and they start retweeting stuff that I seriously don't like on Twitter, that kind of sucks. But in an RSS reader, I'm subscribed to this news site and that blog or whatever, and I just get what they publish, and that's what I wanted. And it's nice. It's restful.
Now, something that has changed since the last time you were working real seriously on this is the news feed, the collection under Engine. Like, so for so long, everybody did it through Google, where Google had a free service that would manage your RSS feeds for you. And then you could point any RSS reader at the Google engine and get them. Well, Google shut that down when they realized that it made more sense for them to have people go on the internet than to have an RSS feed.
People still mourn the loss of Google Reader. I don't, because I thought that the user interface for that app was just horrible, and I couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
I did have, at the time, NetNewsWire worked with it, so you could do your syncing over Google Reader. But now the Google Reader's gone, we have a ton of RSS readers out there. Feedbin and Feedly and iKnowReader and Fresh RSS. There's a whole lot of different web-based systems.
Yeah.
So my goal with NetNewsWire is just to add support for all of them.
Yeah.
At least, as many as possible. I'm not a fan of centralization.
Sure.
Because, there are a lot of problems with that. So having a whole bunch of different systems, even though it means more work for me, I way prefer it. I think it's good.
RSS has really transformed in the death of Google Reader into something like email, where you can pick from endless providers or even host it yourself if you want and use any number of clients that you want on any devices that you want. And it's up to the end user to make their own decisions about the services or companies they want to pay or use and the trade-offs that come with each of them. And I think that it's good for the web and good for people who want to consume the web via RSS. And we have all these options that,
absolutely,
when Google was around, they'd sucked all the air out of the room.
And no single RSS feed service can cripple the industry like Google kind of did when they first said, "Oh, we're shutting it down."
Yeah. See, yeah, I think centralization like that is almost always a mistake. And sometimes the consequences haven't really happened just yet, or maybe they're not totally visible to everyone, but it becomes visible.
Yeah.
Twitter and Facebook, I think, are really, really huge problems. Not everyone agrees yet, but I think we'll see that more and more.
Yeah, in my head, I think of it kind of like gravity. The more reliant you become on a service, the further the eggs are going to fall if they shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure.
and I don't like that. I don't like being too dependent. I know that I guess Apple's kind of famous for not wanting to be dependent on outside vendors for making their products. which is why they internalize so much. I don't want to be reliant on third party systems to make my work happen. And
Right, sure.
and whenever I do pick one, I always pick one that I feel like, well, if they went away, could I export my data? Could I move to a different platform? And that, I guess that's true for RSS as well.
Yeah, and it's not just if they went away. If you feel like you need to leave them, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at Facebook and you say their security lapses and ethical and moral issues are such that I can't be associated with them, is it feasible to leave? And I think that's something you need to ask about everything.
You mentioned that this iteration of NetNewsWire is open source, so you are not the only developer working on it. You have other people who are contributing code, contributing features. How does the management of that look? What are you using, either GitHub or beyond, to sort of manage that, and just the community of people who are now contributing to it? Like, what does that look like, and how is it different from when you were the one-man band?
Well, it's always fun to be a one-man band in a way, because you're responsible for everything. Every single line of code is yours. Everything about the app is yours. And working with other people, it really changes that. But I knew I wanted to work with other people because that's fun and rewarding in its own ways. And so the way we're doing it is we have a Slack group with a number of different rooms. And we have GitHub. And we have on GitHub, we have the issues tracker. And I can create milestones and decide what's going to happen when. And other than that, I'm basically kind of making it up as I go along. I've never done this kind of management before. And so, I'm just trying to do my best to make sure that people are working on stuff that they're happy to work on. And it's my responsibility to make sure that the quality of the app is always there, that it's always fast, that the design is good, that it doesn't crash, all those things. Because in the end, it's it still reads as NetNewsWire by Brent Simmons, even though we have a team. So I've got to make sure all that stuff is upheld. And, basically I talk things over. I often try to find consensus and then ignore it or not.
So the idea of having something that starts out as a hobby or a passion that turns into a way to make a living, but then later turns back into a passion or a hobby.
Yeah.
What surprised you about that third step?
I think what surprised me is how much I've been enjoying this even more than the old days when it was, my job. And it was great, having a thing that I just made and that became a hit app and did well for me financially. And that was a thrill. And, seeing all the people who loved it and communicating with them, that was great. But this is even better. And part of it's because, I'm a more mature person. I know how to make apps. I'm better at making apps in various ways than ever before. But a lot of it is just having really great people to work with and, and seeing what they bring. And that's, it's just so much fun. It's beyond even what I thought it would be.
Also, you know what? You've got a few more years under your belt and you probably just don't get hung up on it like you used to.
That's true too. I can remember, 10, 15 years ago, spending a week on getting a gradient just right.
Yeah.
And it would just go from, medium gray to a slightly lighter gray, but I would just, go back and forth for so long. These days I'm like, no, that looks good. And, and just move on,
Where are you on that spectrum, Stephen? I'm suspecting you're still probably spending a few days on the gradient.
Yeah. No, guilty as charged.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Give it some time, brother. Just give it some time.
I mean, I can see even in the 5 years of doing Relay that shift that happens to all of us, but some things are harder to let go of than others. So it's a metaphorical gradient.
Right, sure. We all want to do the very best thing, but there are some decisions you reach a certain level of wisdom where you're like, well, actually A and B are both pretty good and either one's fine. So just flip a coin and move on. Right. And it's learning
Right.
which decisions are those versus which ones really are critical, is part of what comes with experience.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Direct Mail. Create and send great-looking email newsletters with Direct Mail. It's an easy-to-use email marketing app designed exclusively for the Mac. Email marketing works, and Direct Mail is the application built for your Mac that lets you create and send great-looking email newsletters. Email marketing is still an incredibly cost-effective way to reach your customers and grow your business. And for the past 15 years, Mac users around the world have trusted the Direct Mail app to handle all of their email marketing needs. It's designed just for the Mac, which means it's fast and easy to use and works great with the other apps and services you already use. With Direct Mail, you can quickly and easily compose high-quality emails that look great on mobile and desktop. You can grow your mailing list by creating email sign-up forms that you can add to your website or Facebook page, and you can save time by integrating over 1,000 other apps and services on your Mac and the web. Best of all, Direct Mail has real human live chat customer support available to answer your questions. And Direct Mail is the #1 top-rated email marketing app for the Mac with 5-star reviews on the App Store, GetApp, and elsewhere. And it's trusted by small businesses, nonprofits, schools, and even Fortune 500 companies alike. Direct Mail is free to download and get started. Listeners of this podcast can save 10% off all of their future pricing plans. Just head over to directmailmac.com/MPU to check it out. That's directmailmac.com/MPU to get 10% off when you opt for a full feature plan. Our thanks to Direct Mail for their support of the Mac Power Users.
So hand in hand with NetNewsWire and consuming RSS is blogging, sort of the other side of the coin. You have written at anycentral.com for I don't even know how long. As long as I can remember, I've read it for years. And one thing I love about your writing is that it seems very authentic. That talking to you here, talking to you at WBC, reading your blog, it's all the same thing. It's the same Brent Simmons, no matter where you are. And for those who look at blogging as something that may be old-fashioned compared to something like Twitter or Facebook, I feel like you don't agree with that. What keeps you blogging almost every day? And if someone's looking to get started, where would you point them?
So my blog will be 20 years old this month.
Congratulations.
Been doing it a long time. Thank you. Yeah. And it's funny, at the time when I started, I thought, I guess I'm pretty late to this, but I might as well do it anyway. And 20 years later, still doing it. So it's another one of those things where it may be a personality flaw that just ends up looking good. I'm just kind of compelled to keep communicating. I have things, I have to write them up. I have to hit publish. It would be harder to stop myself. It's never hard to continue. That's the easy part. Stopping would be difficult. Hopefully I never do. So if you want to get started with blogging, honestly, I think micro.blog is a really good place to start because it's pretty simple and there's an attached social network. So it makes it easier to see people engaged with what you're doing. And that's good. A lot of people like, some kind of feedback when they're blogging. It's harder to just put stuff out and have faith that somebody's finding it. It's nice to get some feedback. So that's where I would send people.
And this is a service for those who aren't familiar with it that our friend Matt and Reese has put together. And it is, I think micro.blog is a little confusing on the surface of it because it kind of looks like Twitter to a degree, but then it also kind of doesn't. So if you could give people the elevator pitch for why that's where they should start, what would it be?
Micro.blog really is kind of two things. One is just think of it as, it's a blogging platform. You write a post, it goes on your blog, just like with any other blog, and it's on the web and there you go. But attached to that is also the ability to follow other people's blogs in a way where the user interface kind of looks like Twitter. So you just have, a long list of, stuff. New stuff comes in at the top as other people write stuff. And you can also reply to them. So it has both of those aspects. but it's almost entirely based on RSS. So it's using, open standards and protocols, and it really works with the web rather than against it. It's not a closed off walled garden silo or anything. I like that a ton.
And you don't have to run out and pay for hosting somewhere, run your own server. It's sort of an all-in-one.
Now it does work if you have a blog hosted elsewhere. You can still take part in the social networking part of this too. So it's open and you can kind of plug into it in different ways. But if you're just looking for a place to start writing a blog, I'd say set one up there. It's pretty easy.
We started the show off giving Apple a hard time about laptop keyboards, but you've been a Mac user for a long time, and you've seen ups and downs over the years. How would you grade the Mac currently, and what do you see the trajectory of the Mac in the future?
Well, speaking of keyboards, on my iMac at home, I'm still using a Apple keyboard from 1995.
Does the S key still work?
Yes, it does.
There you go.
It's an amazing keyboard. It's the Apple Extended Keyboard 2.
Yeah.
So it is. So
best keyboard ever made.
Compared to that, no keyboard stands out.
I'm actually surprised Steven isn't like using one of those. And you need like four dongles or something to make it work, right? It's like
you just need one dongle, but unless you have USB-C, then I guess in case you need two. No, RSI did that in for me. The key travel I can't do anymore, but I typed on one every day for a long, long time.
Every version of NetNewsWire ever has been written on this one keyboard. Different Macs, but same keyboard.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
In fact, in the same room in the same house.
So that's the NetNewsWire room.
Yes, absolutely.
One day the museum will be right that room.
But the future of the Mac, I don't know. I'm not super good at that particular kind of punditry. I don't know. I know what I'd like it to be, which is basically this type of interaction has been pretty well thought out and refined, and it could stand to have incremental improvements, but I never stopped loving it. I never stopped being able to get my work done using Macs, so I just kind of want to keep having Macs.
Yeah. Keep polishing.
Yeah, right. I don't want to touch my screen. I want to use my mouse and my keyboard and trackpad, and I like the precision of it. I like the fact that I can really fly around and be super productive on a Mac. And I want to keep it that way.
As a developer, though, there have been a ton of changes, right? When you started the NetNewsWire project, Cocoa was sort of the new hotness, but now we have Swift and SwiftUI and Catalyst, all these other technologies that have come along. Does that change the way that you think about the future of NetNewsWire? You said that you've implemented Swift into it. I think you've said elsewhere that you've played with SwiftUI, but are you building things now that you think, oh gosh, this is only going to be around for a little while? Like, how do you try to map that out in your work?
So I've always tried to be modern, right? Using the latest modern tools, adopt new technologies as quickly as possible, and that hasn't changed. I may be in my 50s, but I'm not and I may love Macs, but I'm not a curmudgeon about this stuff. In fact, I'm very pro, using what's new and getting to learn it and everything. So NetNewsWire is almost entirely written in Swift, except for some really old bits. We did try using SwiftUI, but it's too soon for that to fit all our needs. So we ended up having to back off. But hopefully next year we'll be able to use it.
Okay.
And if we have to rewrite some code so that we can use SwiftUI, we probably would. Because part of the deal with the project is staying modern and having fun with it. So, I would trash some perfectly good working code in favor of using new stuff sometimes. Totally fine. But the Mac app is still based on AppKit. It's not a Catalyst app. And I think that AppKit is going to be around for quite some while, even if it ends up not being the dominant way that Mac apps are made at some point in the future. It's still going to be supported long enough that that's the way to go right now, at least for me. So I'm happy doing that. Now, someday may come where Apple signals that they're going to deprecate it and you should be using something else. But hopefully that something else is more Swift UI rather than just essentially writing an iOS app and running it on your Mac. But we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. Either way, I plan to be here and staying modern and doing what it takes.
It seems like Swift UI is the clear direction they want to go eventually,
I think so.
But it's still also pretty rough around the edges from what I've been hearing.
Yeah, and there's just a whole lot of it's not designed to handle yet, and so it's really early days for that. But it looks like a good direction for the future, and it's really one way I look at it is Swift UI is the first thing to come out of Apple besides Swift in its new Swift era. And Catalyst is really from the Objective-C era, right? UIKit is still, Objective-C like descends from Next technology. Whereas Swift UI is brand new, nothing to do with Next. It's, entirely created at App Post Next World. So it looks like the future to me.
It's like, Catalyst is like the Band-Aid, the short-term solution.
Sure.
Whereas Swift UI is the long-term. And that would be great. I mean, if you can get in Swift UI, I could foresee a future where NetNewsWire gets to all the Apple platforms very easily. I mean, there's a lot of good reasons for it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it may not be the case that you would actually run the exact same code on Mac and iOS, but you would run maybe very similar code. And regardless, Swift UI ought to make doing user interface programming easier and better.
Yeah.
Because user interface programming is still just a boring slog. I mean, it sounds like it might be the most fun part, but it's really not. Most developers will agree. It's just kind of awful. So if Swift UI makes that better, then we will all be super glad.
All right. So every guest on MPU often has a few favorite apps or services that they use to get their work done. Sometimes they're little known apps nobody's ever heard of. Sometimes maybe they're big apps everybody's heard of, but I always like to share a couple. Are there any apps on iOS or Mac that bring you particular delight?
One is Acorn by Gus Mueller. It's an image editor.
Yeah.
And it's on a Mac. And I don't have to use it every day necessarily, but I've got screenshots or dog pictures or something that I need to get ready for the web. So I'll use it once or twice a week, and it works really, really nicely. It's easy to learn, easy to use, and does exactly what I need it to do. And I've been using it for years. But I'm not a heavy graphics person, but I think Acorn could handle a lot more than what I need from it. But it does what I need.
That's a good one. A lot of Mac Power users are Acorn users.
Cool.
Any others?
Let's see. I mentioned micro.blog. That's such a great thing. We've talked a bit about GitHub. GitHub is an amazing service for developers. And I think all developers already know that already.
Yeah, one of the apps you had mentioned when we were talking earlier was Flume, and that's an app I'd never heard of.
Oh, yeah, right. That's so part of my job, again, is social media at Omni. And so we post to Facebook, Twitter, micro.blog, LinkedIn even, but also Instagram. And that's really just a pain because I'm posting to everything else on my Mac through their browser-based UI or whatever. And but Instagram, there's just no way to do that unless you use Flume, which is an app that does some kind of trickery, maybe user agent spoofing or something, to get Instagram to work inside a Mac app. And from there, I can post videos and pictures and whatever. And so I use that a few times a week. But yeah, it certainly makes it a lot easier than trying to get the photo over on iOS and doing all the things there.
Yeah, but you're going to be an iPad power user next week, so
yeah.
Well, that really won't help you with Instagram, will it?
No, it won't. That's a good point.
I don't know why they're so resistant to that. It seems silly.
Yeah, truly.
Well, Brent Simmons, I, for one, am so happy that NetNewsWire is back in active development and that you are the person behind it. Congratulations on releasing it and this new little hobby of yours involving computer programming.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, it really is. Oh, It's such a thrill. I love that, I'm in the call it the last third of my career, and I'm getting to have more fun now than ever. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, there is something to be said for that. Like getting, past the halfway mark, but feeling like you still got a lot of gas in the tank and you're making some of your best stuff, right? I feel
absolutely.
the same way. It makes you jump out of bed in the mornings, and
Yeah,
I can tell you do the same. The and also congratulations with what you're doing at Omni, and just as a member of the community, I want to thank you for bringing NetNewsWire to us. And honestly, you were just part of that whole kind of programming ethic at the beginning on the Mac about making an app where you spent a week worried about the gradient and setting a standard that I think still resonates on Mac apps and iOS apps and kind of all the way down the platforms. You were part of that vanguard.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And I learned it from the people who came before me.
Yeah.
Right. This is, if you're a Mac developer, this is what you do. This is how it works. It's your calling.
Where should folks go to find you, Brent?
Well, my blog is inessential.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Brent Simmons.
All right. And gang, we are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. You can join the forums at talk.macpowerusers.com. Thank you to our sponsors, 1Password, Smile, Linode, and Direct Mail. And we'll see you all next week.